Let's sit tall, close the eyes. I'm just taking these moments to arrive, to land softly, to hone your awareness and presence. Not to the things outside of you, but to the peace within. Notice how vast that peace is. Almost as if you were standing on the shore of a lake that you could not even see the other side. Just seems to go on for eternity. Can you dive in? Can you jump into the beautifully warm, comforting waters of inner peace? Can you let go of the ground that your feet stand on? Can you dip your toe in the water? Notice the resistance and the willingness. Notice the push and the pull. Notice the difference in the two voices, the one that tells you stay grounded on that earth you're stepped on, and the voice that says, let go. And therein lies our struggle. The idea that the peace is somewhere inaccessible or difficult to access, and that it represents something other than reality. And so we've chosen the earth that we're stepping on, the little piece of shoreline that we're inhabiting, the sense of security and safety, even if it's not true. So just know that that's the struggle. And it's also a gift. Because in the end, there is only awareness and awakening. Draw the hands together in front of the heart. And we'll lift our voices in one Om, followed by the invocation mantras. Om. Shri Guru Bhyo Namaha. Hari Om. Ganana Antva Ganapati Gum Havamahe Kavin Kavinam Upamashravastamam Jestarajam Brahmanan Brahmanaspata Anashrin Vanuti Pisidha Sadhanam Mahaganapataye Namaha Prano Devi Saraswati Vajebhir Vajini Vati Dhinama Vitriyavatu Ano divo brahataf parvata da saraswati ajata gantu yagnyam havan devi jujushana gritachi shagmam nova chamushati shrinotu vagdevyai namaha. And gently releasing the hands down and fluttering the eyes open. And so how many of you could visualize that or could sense that in some way, shape, or form? That when you close your eyes and you go inside of yourself, that you're on a bit of a precipice, right? You're kind of like standing on the edge there. And that inner peace is everything, it seems, except where you're standing. It seems. And then the battle starts. Do I step off the precipice, off the line of the shore, into the water? What do I do? How do I surrender? What does it all mean? I want to, but I don't want to. But I want to, but I don't want to. And then that internal battle seems to, on some level, negate the idea that peace is within you. Because if it's within you, shouldn't it just always automatically be accessible? Shouldn't you just automatically be able to jump off the precipice, step off the shoreline into the ocean of peace? Shouldn't you just be able to do that? And really the answer is both complicated and simple. It depends on how much you've invested in the shoreline. It depends on how much you've invested in that little piece of real estate that you're claiming as your reality. And if you've invested greatly in that, then you can be attached to a whole herd of buffalo going over that edge. You aren't going anywhere. You will grip and stand and hold your ground to your last breath. That's what we do as human beings. We grip and we hold our stance and we say, no, not going there. And the question is, why? Why? What that expanse represents is consciousness. What it represents is the essence of your own true self. What it represents is the potential of you, what you carry within yourself. And yes, you carry the distress and the suffering in some way, shape, or form, or at least the tendency to give in to that, to choose that. You carry that choice within yourself. But peace is so much more than a choice. It's actually your birthright. Peace is so much more than just a potential. It's actually what you already are and have been covering up for however many years and lives you've been around. Peace is so much more than a concept. It's actually the substrate of everything, everywhere. And it's not a substrate that is new to us. It's not a substrate that science is just starting to explore and understand. It's a substrate that was there at the beginning of the beginningless, all through, and will be there beyond the end of this physical universe. It's actually the stuff of the universe, at least the innermost stuff. So why, when we have all of that available to us, do we stand on that one little spot of what we perceive to be solid ground and say, it's very pretty and I kind of like the feeling from here, no need to go further? Or we stand there and say, nope, I don't know what's out there. I don't know what's in that ocean. Could be sharks. Could be all kinds of stuff. Could be something waiting to hurt me. Could be something I just don't know about. But that's kind of a silly comparison, isn't it? Because where you're standing and its relationship to the physical world, there's so much here that's waiting, predatory in nature. This whole human-made world is full of harm, full of violence, full of things and people and animals and whatever that can inflict harm. So to say, I won't go to this one place that feels really good to my soul because I'm afraid of getting hurt there, in favor of a place that is already hurting you. Does that sound like the decision of a sane person? So what is it then? Why is it that we close our eyes and we're teetering in between these two realms? We're standing on the edge, some kind of firmness beneath our feet, something familiar anyway. And then we look out and we say, that's all so romantic and so beautiful and so poetical, and it brings a little bit of peace to my heart just knowing that it's there, or a great deal of fear, or both. Thank you, I'll go now. I'll return back to that which causes my suffering. The simple answer is it's all in the investments we make while we are abiding in this world that we have decided to invest in. So as we walk through this life, in this world, we look around and we say, well, I can feel these things. I can see these things. I can smell those things. I can hear those things. I can taste those things. So I can make some kind of direct investment in those things based on my likes and dislikes to some degree. But when it comes to the realm of peace, I can't use my eyes, my ears, my nose, my tongue, or my skin necessarily to understand that space. I can't make a physical investment there. I can't have the same kind of gross relationship with that I have with the world. My relationship with the physical world is completely a gross relationship. And what do I mean by gross? It's obvious, because it's the five senses. When I go inside myself, when I close my eyes and I find myself, teetering on that little edge between the gross world and the ocean of peace, how do I anchor myself down? How do I know I won't just float away, as one student asked me at one point? Was I actually floating? It felt like I was floating. And I said, no, you were very grounded on your cushion, but it felt like I was floating. Did you ever lose anybody in this class? We can tie a string to you if you want, and then if you start floating, we'll just pull you back down. But what do I anchor into in that space? You can't use the five senses there necessarily. The senses will let you know you're coming close to it, because you'll start to feel something. It'll be a feeling of tenderness, of softness. It'll be a feeling of some kind of relief physically, mentally, and emotionally. But then you have to go past that feeling in order to really submerge yourself into the peace. Because peace isn't based on those types of feelings. Does that make sense? Peace isn't based on those types of feelings. Your introduction to peace is. but peace itself is not. And why not? Because when I close my eyes and I recognize that I'm standing on that edge, and I say, I'm feeling some relief here. Instantaneously, bless you, instantaneously my ego makes a judgment call. And it says, I like that. I don't like that. If it says I don't like that, let the battle begin, and pretty much there's a lot of defeat there, because the ego will do whatever it has to do, kick, punch, cry, scream, wail, stomp its feet to get what it wants. So the moment that the ego says, I don't like that, there's no place for me there, you can be guaranteed that you're in for a battle. If there's some other part of you that's calling you to the peace, if there's some other part of you that says, don't listen to the ego, it's just whining again. This is actually the truth of you. The truth of you. No, it's not. Yes, it is. No, it's not. And so there's this internal dialogue. It sets up a preference. And preferences are not oftentimes helpful in the long run. Take that with a grain of salt. They can be a little bit helpful, but not this kind of preference. We set up this preference, this idea of I like this or I don't like this. And then if we decide we like this, I really like this, I like this feeling, I like standing on this edge and just knowing that relief is there. But I'm not quite ready to embrace it yet. But make sure it's there every time I close my eyes, just so I can have a little bit of that relief. And then one day we close the eyes and the mind is bonkers and the relief isn't there. And then we lose faith that it even existed in the first place. Because if it was there once, it should always be there, because it's my preference that it should be there. So we set ourselves up for disappointment. So if we really want to experience inner peace, we have to go beyond the feeling of relief, beyond the feeling of I like this, beyond the feeling of I'm afraid of this, beyond all those feelings. Literally dissolving ourselves into the very ethers of peace itself. And that means no personality, no preference, no worry, no fear, no grasping. And it even means, in a human way, no enjoying. Because the five senses aren't active there. Well, why would I want to do that then? Why? I mean, can't I at least have the enjoyment? The enjoyment turns to pain eventually. Why? How many of you have ever had a decent moment in meditation? Just a moment. Okay, why was it just a moment and not still happening? What happened?
I thought about it.
Because you thought about it. What else happened? The phone rang. The kids slammed the door. Your partner said, hey, or when are we having breakfast? You got irritated because your knee hurt. Something happened. So the enjoyment isn't permanent. The human enjoyment isn't permanent. So we need to move beyond the expectation of the enjoyment. What makes it worth it then? Like, it sounds a bit robotic, It sounds like kind of dull. But actually, when you move beyond the impressions of the senses to some degree, even to a little degree, you open yourself up to something. that in the teachings is called Ananda. Ananda. Ananda is bliss. It's not really bliss, but it's bliss. So it's like a translation thing, you know. Because in English we say, well, that's bliss, because it's more than happiness. But actually what it is extreme esoteric delight or understanding or peace. And in peace, all things are enjoyable. In peace, there's only contentment. In peace, there's only acceptance. So, whether you're wading through these peaceful, calm waters and nothing happens, or you get stung by a jellyfish, there's no disturbance to the peace within, because it's a different kind of peace than your personal satisfaction, getting your way. Does that make sense? No? So we have to look at what we're investing in. And typically we invest in those things that we understand through the five senses. And I'm not down on the five senses. I'm not saying that you got to kill the five senses. No, but you do need to train them a little bit. At least a little bit. Tiny little bit. Little tiny bit of training goes a long way. Little tiny bit of training can actually minimize greatly your level of suffering in this life. It can minimize the impact of preferences. A little bit of training can make a big change. Because a little bit of training will empower you to not only stand on the edge, but to also put your foot in the water, to test it out, to try it out, to see. A little bit of training cultivates courage within you, curiosity within you, bravery within you, so that we move beyond the questions of what if, 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 and what if. And if you think about it, every single thing we ask is what if, what if. We're going to be having new windows put in on the side of the building soon. Within the next couple of weeks, they're going to start. And I'm so excited for the new windows. But I do acknowledge that there's a lot of what ifs. You know, and like some of them are pretty serious. Like, this is an old building. What if the wall falls down when they take these old windows out? What if they make a mess? What if they mess up this beautiful new room? What if? This is what our life is like. It's full of what if, what if, what if. And the what if steals from us our courage, our curiosity, our bravery, and our ability to put our toes in the water, maybe even our whole foot, and maybe even just take a dive in. So a little bit of training shows us how to stop relying so heavily upon what if. And the what ifs are focused really toward the satisfaction or the degradation of the five senses. It's what's going to make me happy, what's going to cause me pain. What's going to bring me sensory pleasure, what's going to bring me sensory dissatisfaction. And so all the what ifs are based on that. So a little bit of training gives us some space between ourselves and the function of the five senses. In this human body, we're never going to be without the five senses. So people who say, shut down the five senses completely, it's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. But you can come to a place in your relationship with the five senses where they are not the ones with the reins and the whip. You can come to a place in your relationship with the five senses where you are the one, based on your dharma and your understanding of your spiritual path, you're the one making the choices of what to invest in. It's not just impulsiveness based on the gratification of the five senses or the degradation of the five senses. You can come to a place where you recognize, oh, that French toast bake that they made smells so good. And then when it tastes so good too, then it's going to be, let's have seconds. But you stop yourself and you say, no, I recognize that it is a sensory stimulation. And that while it may smell really great and it may taste really great, a second serving may not feel really great. So instead of going there, I'm going to sit with the enjoyment that I already have and just appreciate it and be grateful for it. Period. So that's how we can maneuver our relationships with the senses in the physical world, is by limiting them. Not harshly, not in ways that are harmful or violent to the self, but in ways that actually open you up to a greater sense of freedom. How many of you have ever given in to eating an entire pizza? Come on, people. Honesty here. How about a whole cake? Something, right? How'd you feel afterward? Terrible. Why?
It didn't really, something that your body didn't really need, and your body didn't know what to do with it, and
I had nothing left for the next day. The moment passed.
Right? Exactly. So when I say limit your dependence upon the five senses, what I'm saying is don't let your five senses take you to that extreme. Because once you've done that, once you've eaten the whole pizza or ate the whole cake or whatever it is for you, inevitably what is there? Suffering. Suffering. And the suffering increases a sense of fear, and the fear stops you from putting your toes in the waters of peace. Because you become more consumed at why you're mad at yourself, why you're disappointed, why it didn't work out, why can't the pizza? Maybe next time it'll be different and it'll feel better. Because even though you felt like crap after eating the whole pizza, a couple of days later, what did you want? Pizza. We don't learn our lesson, So learning how to some, at least small degree, control the senses is not a matter of being harmful to yourself or highly austere with yourself, at least not until you understand those more. Initially, it's about just making better choices. Choices that are going to leave the physical body in a better state, less congested, less stuffed, less slow, less sluggish, less tired. Leave the mental body in a better state, less depressed, less excited, less back and forth like a Super Bowl between the two places. That are going to leave the emotional body in a better place, less angry, less passionate, less an emotional roller coaster ride of the what ifs and the woulda, shoulda, couldas and the desires and the lust and the hate and the greed and all those other things. So a little bit of training allows you to control the senses at least a little bit, so that the sensory impressions and everything that goes along with them don't have such an intense impact on you. And in the space that's cultivated as a result, you can breed what you want to breed, invest in what your heart wants to invest in. And those things are nonviolence, truthfulness, non-grasping, economy of energy, cleanliness, contentment, space for true self-study, devotion, and a compassionate discipline too. The yamas and the niyamas. So you're either investing in the yamas and the niyamas, or you're not. And if you're investing in your decision to eat yet again the whole pizza, then you are not investing in the yamas and the niyamas. Because that in and of itself, knowing what the outcome is going to be fully well, is an act of violence to the self. There's a long way to get to that, wasn't it? Does that make sense, though? Yeah. And as long as there's more interest in when is it going to happen that I can have the whole pizza and not have it leave me feeling horrible, when there's more, it's not until there's less investment in that there can be more investment in internal peace. Because the two cannot really coincide. You can't feed into both. Maybe the idea is, well, Fridays is my day for indulgence, and Sunday is my day for yoga. So Fridays, I'll give in. I'll go, and if I want some chocolate cake, I'll have it. And if I want some pizza, I'll have it. If I want some ice cream, I'll have it. And if I want some wine, I'll have it. If I want some whiskey, I'll have it. Whatever I want to have, I'll have on Friday. Friday is my day of indulgence. And Sunday will be my day of peace. And I can separate them that way, can't I? Can I? No. Why not? Because the lingering effects are not just physical. They're not just mental and they're not just emotional. They're also energetic. And inevitably, if Friday is your day of indulgence, that's what you're going to be thinking about on Sunday. As you're sitting there in your meditative posture, thinking, I could go get pizza. Friday's not too far off. It's only 6 more days. Well, really 5.5 more days. I don't really have to wait until Friday. I could make it Tuesdays and Fridays. And are you investing in peace in that moment? No. You're investing in sensory stimulation and in the ego's longing for further gratification come Friday. And then there's the physical stuff that goes with it too, because alcohol's not out of your system, energetically speaking, in 24 or 48 hours. It has lingering effects physically. The food has lingering effects physically. Everything in this material world has lingering effects physically, mentally, and emotionally. So we can't fool ourselves into believing that I can compartmentalize my life. This is when I get to be mean. And then I'll just change over here and be kind. The effects of meanness travel over into the time where you think you'll have the ability to be kind. And in what way? Guilt, shame, self-degradation, the way that you're angry with yourself over whatever it was that you did when you were mean. Well, this is my time, I will be angry. And then over here, I will not be angry. And while I do feel that in that particular instance, there is a therapeutic benefit in the short term of compartmentalizing to some small degree our experience with anger, at some point we need to go beyond that. And what I mean by that is this. Anger is something, it's like the driving force of all people. Anger is the driving force of all people. We let our anger run wild with us. It doesn't take much. Somebody just moves into your parking spot, picks up the wrong latte off of the Starbucks platform. Somebody looks at you funny. They say hello, right? And all of a sudden, there's that anger. So initially, it might be beneficial for us to try to move that anger into a particular space where we can look at it, study it, reflect on it, see what its triggers are. Why does it come up the way that it comes up? And then attempt to not be so moved by it in the rest of our life. But as you all know who have tried to do that, it is not easy, right? A trigger is a trigger is a trigger. But we do learn something from that. But eventually, what do we have to do? Eventually, we have to say to ourselves and accept that anger is not the best investment for us to be making, period. It's just not. At least not the kind of anger that comes from the ego. The kind of anger that comes from the ego is not the best investment for us to be making, because it does have these threads that just feed through into every other part of life. And so I said anger of the ego. Well, what other kind of anger is there? Well, it depends upon a person's take on it, but there is supposedly something called justifiable anger. And justifiable anger is the reaction that we have when we come into the witnessing of injustice. There's a justifiable anger there. But we have to be really careful that our anger is not being oriented at the soul of another person, but to the circumstances. Because the circumstances, we can work to shift circumstances. But to condemn the soul of another person, there's a lot of karma there. Does that make sense? Yeah. It's very, very difficult. It's not an easy conversation. It's not easy to kind of explain. But I think that when we're in the midst of it, we kind of know. Because we know when our anger is like red hot fire, where we're going to annihilate anybody and anything in our path in order to prove the point of our own superiority, of our own righteousness, of our own correctness. We're willing to lay other people out to do that. Versus this kind of concept of a justifiable anger where you see a child has been harmed and you don't want that child to feel that way, even though you know maybe they have to for reasons we will never understand. So you decide to take on the role of comforter and protector. You comfort the child by giving the child something the child needs. And you protect the child to whatever degree you can. And in that regard, you take on the role of the mother, the divine mother, who is the comforter and the protector. And she has justifiable anger too. She doesn't like to see that her children are hurt in this world. But she also looks and says, but you're hurt because of your own devices. And that's not to say that there isn't such a thing in the world as harm that comes to a person that they did not ask for. But communally, we created this world. Communally, we are all responsible for the condition of the world today. We can't go back and change what the past has done, what the ancestors have done. We can't go back and change that. But communally, what we can do is come together today in a way that makes this a better world for all. So if you're going to have any kind of anger in you, let it be justifiable anger, the kind of anger that's going to prompt you to work toward a better world for all, and not the kind of anger that's going to allow you to annihilate anybody in your way. Does that make sense? No. Okay. So, questions or reflections so far? You look very serious.
I'm listening.
Very intense, yes.
I'm just curious to what your definition of peace is.
Oh, yeah. It's definitely not everything going your way. But people get that idea, don't they? They're like, oh, things are peaceful. And I don't know, I kind of love the t-shirts that are like, I'm peace, I'm chill, And it's like, yeah, that ain't peace. That's delusion. Peace is not everything going your way. Peace is not avoiding being hurt. Peace is not only having great things happen and nobody irks you. Peace is not, life not getting under your skin, right? That's not peace. Peace is the way you stand in the midst of it. Peace is the recognition that whatever the storm is around me, and even if it is seemingly touching me at times, I still have the ability to be the eye of that storm. The ability to just be. And what gives me the ability to just be, what gives you the ability to just be, is faith. Shraddha. So Shraddha is oftentimes translated as faith, but it's actually more than that, because faith can be easily broken. Shraddha is sincerity of faith. It's a sincere faith that is not breakable. So things don't go my way, okay. I have a constant conversation with the mother. Always talking to her. Always talking to her. Sometimes I wonder if somebody looked in the window, would they think, like, who the hell is she talking to? Talking to her. To her. To her. Talking to mother. And what I say to her is, whatever you want. Just please make it obvious, because I'm dense. And I'll get it in my brain that you want it a certain way. And that might not be what you mean. So whatever you want me to be alive, I'll be alive. You want me to hold the space, I'll hold the space. You want me to teach the teachings, I'll teach the teachings. You want me to dig dirt, I'll dig dirt. You want me to cry, I'll cry. You want me to hurt, I'll hurt. Whatever you put in front of me, I will accept. To the very best of my ability. Whether it's comfortable or not. That's peace. That's peace. And then what that does for us is it opens us up to a unique ability to be able to function in the midst of dysfunction. To be able to know what is actually needed versus what the ego wants. And what is needed is very rarely what the ego wants. The ego wants something that's going to limit its discomfort and maximize its satisfaction. But the heart looks out at this world and says, that's just not possible. It's just not possible. And even the Buddha, right? So the Buddha was born a prince in a family of royalty. And his father was told that he would have religious or spiritual inclinations, and that these spiritual inclinations would threaten the royal family because he would be pulled to these spiritual inclinations and not want much to do with the fanciness of the royal family. So what does his father do? His father creates a situation where the boy never sees pain or suffering, which are the greatest catalysts to our own spiritual growth. He keeps him in the palace. He removes anybody who is sick, ailing, dying, or dead. He never lets him see a hungry person, a sad person. He completely protects him from all that. Even all that protection couldn't keep him from wanting to know the truth. So as a young man, he climbed over the walls of the palace and he started to walk through the streets. And the first thing he came upon was a man who was sick and dying, sitting on the edge of the road with no food, with a cup, begging. And he said, "What's wrong with you?" He said, "What do you mean, what's wrong with me? I'm dying." And he said, "What do you mean you're dying?" And he said, "Well, I'm dying. I'm going to die. You know what death is." And he was so moved by this that he left. By then he had been married, and he left. He left the palace, he left his wife, he left his family, and he went off and he found the yogis. And he sat with them for some period of time. And in order to come to understand the suffering of this worldly life, he committed great austerities. Now, back then, that's the classical period of yoga. It was practiced primarily by sadhus, by individuals who did not have households, who separated themselves from society and who committed great and severe austerities so that they could understand suffering and pain and transcend above it so that they could come into God consciousness. So he did that. He ate 1 grain of rice for a day, drank no water, hung upside down for 3 months. Whatever the practice happened to be is what he did. And he almost died. And he collapsed by the side of a stream. And one of the stories that a young maiden found him and nursed him back to health in her hut. And when he came back to, he went out and sat under the Bodhi tree and went into his famous meditation. And as he was sitting there in meditation, he had a realization. And that was when he came to, back into the physical, and he said, there's 4 truths in this life. First truth, there's suffering. Surprise. There's suffering. The second truth, there's a cause for suffering. It's called attachment. Third truth, there can be an end to suffering. Fourth truth, it's called the Eightfold Path of the Buddha. Very similar to the yamas and the niyamas. And he also said something else. He said, austerity is not the answer. Severe austerity is not the answer because it's violence. Self-inquiry, constant realignment with compassion. That's the answer. Cultivate a compassionate, courageous heart. That's the answer. And so yoga has changed a lot over the years, and in some ways it hasn't, but mostly it has, in that it's now available to householders. And when you go into a yoga class, which is not the way that people practiced in the past, but when you go into a yoga class today, you go in and you say, okay, I am doing this work consciously. I'm going to use the props I need to protect my body from pain. But I'm also going to acknowledge that there's this thing called discomfort. It's largely mental. And I'm going to sit with that. And I'm going to cultivate resiliency to the discomfort. Because the discomfort is a psychological experience of life primarily. It's that I don't like this. I don't like having to do this work. I don't like feeling tightness in my body. I don't like having to sit here for 12 minutes while she talks. I don't like it. It's psychological. So I'm going to sit there anyway. And that's our austere practice, is to sit there anyway and to cultivate a resiliency to the sensory impressions that we receive as a result of our life experience. And as we cultivate the resiliency, then suddenly peace becomes more accessible to us because we're able to stand more firmly in our faith no matter what's happening around us. And every single one of you have had that experience since you've started practicing yoga, where you've looked at yourself and said, wow, that's not at all the way I would have reacted to that in the past. I would have flown off the handle. I would have thrown my fist. I would have kicked the wall. I would have done something. But now look, I just say, okay, whatever. I don't need to be involved in that. So that's coming closer to peace. But we have to go beyond that also. We don't have to, but if we want to come into the ultimate truth of ourself at some point, we'll need to go beyond even that and into this place of a greater detachment, a healthy greater detachment, where we acknowledge wholeheartedly, you are on a path and it is not my path. You are on a path, and it is not my path. You are on a path, and it is not my path. I will walk alongside you. I will not harm you. I will not lie to you. I will not waste your energy or mine. I will not be greedy. I will not grasp onto things you say and do. I will keep myself, my words, and my thoughts pure in our relationship. I will practice contentment in acceptance of you as you are as a human being. I will practice discipline in my own self so that I don't give in to my previous conditionings and end up harming you or myself. I will constantly watch myself while I am also witnessing you, but not witnessing you in judgment, witnessing you and bearing witness to your struggles and your victories in the same moment that I am bearing witness to my own, and all in a deep devotion so that we can both together come to know the truth of who we are and the peace within ourselves. Does that make sense? Yeah. Let me do a time check. Very good. Questions or reflections? It's a big thing, isn't it? It's a big thing. It's almost insurmountable. Yeah.
I was really connected to the suffering part of it because, I'm like, I can help, I can do, and I really, like my son has kidney disease, and my other son has another major issues, and I'm like, I can help you. But what you said was so profound that, they're on a different path. I can love them and walk with them, but ultimately it's their path. So thank you for that.
Absolutely. And my heart and my prayers are with them, that they learn whatever it is that they are there to learn, and that they come into a place with these situations where they can experience more love than devastation. Because really, whatever we face in our life, that is the ultimate. The ultimate lesson leads us to the condition where we can experience more love and less devastation. And so love them, and whatever you can reasonably and appropriately do, support them, and don't harm them. That's all. And of course you wouldn't, because you're their mom. But even as moms, we do from time to time. Because, they're kids, no matter how old they are. So you just make the vow to yourself. We talked about it in class this morning, taking the vow of nonviolence. Let that be your first step. Take the vow of nonviolence and say, I will not harm those around me, those far from me, those I know, those I don't know, those I like, those I don't like, those that I really feel I care for, and those who I really feel I don't care for. I will not harm any of them. And then the trick is figuring out what that means, right? So what that means is when you think about that person who, ran their lawnmower over your tulips. Yeah, try not to have it be followed by that stupid jerk. He's just such a mean person. Because you call someone a mean person and then they become a mean person. Yeah, at least in your mind and heart, right? So instead, you could try this, and I know it's, might take a little time, but you could try this. When that impression comes up into your head, you can say to yourself, there had to be some part of that person suffering so deeply as they were running over those flowers. I pray for the healing of that person, that they never have to feel that torn apart again. It doesn't mean they're gonna. But it certainly alleviates you from having to walk around with the guilt of calling them a jerk and this and that and the other thing, and then coming into your spiritual classes where the instructor says, what you call that person is what they become. Yes.
I actually I revisited this thought about having to kind of hate somebody. It just takes so much work, and it just makes your heart sink a little. Like you're talking about the shoulders, it kind of makes you more protective. And in a way that it hurts yourself. It hurts them too, but it hurts you more.
Absolutely.
Forgiveness is where you go.
100%. 100%. Yes. And, when you're saying those things about somebody who has made you angry, what you're not addressing is your own sense of hurt and anger. You're not addressing your own needs. You're just pointing a finger and saying, well, if you would change, then I would be happy. And that's actually not the reality of it. The reality of it, one question you can ask yourself is, why is that behavior triggering me in this way? Why? What is it that I am not giving myself? What is it that I am not recognizing that I need? And I'm depending upon that one person, that one circumstance to give it to me. And then, once you identify it, deal with it. Give it to yourself. So if it's patience that you need, then practice more patience with yourself. If it's love that you need, then love yourself more. You cannot be loved by somebody else enough. It's not possible. You cannot be loved by somebody else enough. Somebody else can love you a lot, and moments you'll feel satiated, but there'll be more moments when you will say, what if? More moments where they cannot love you enough because it's not possible, because you don't love yourself enough. And then when you come into the practice of self-love, when you come into the place of being able to love yourself really, truly, then an interesting thing happens. You don't need their love. You appreciate it. You're grateful for it. You understand that it is a constant struggle, and that whatever they have to offer you, they have taken from their own life struggle to give to you. And that becomes an amazing, precious gift. And I'll explain that another way, because I had this really profound realization maybe 20 years ago. I was working with a woman who had stage 4 breast cancer. And the chemotherapy and all of that had stopped working. So there was nothing else for her to do. She was in an end-of-life state. She had just entered into hospice. And she wanted to come in and to experience Yoga Nidra. She had never experienced Yoga Nidra before. And so I said to the person who connected me with her, I said, well, she doesn't have to come here. I can go to her. And she said, no, she wants to come here. She wants to come here into the space where you normally do these things and experience this in that space rather than in her bed at home. So she came in, and, I had this set up for her. We did the Yoga Nidra, and then she asked for some Reiki, and I offered that to her as well. And then she rested. And as I sat there, just quietly with my eyes closed, it hit me like a brick, or maybe a cinder block, or maybe a wrecking ball. This woman probably has 2 or 3 weeks left of living in this embodiment. That's all she has left in this embodiment. 2 or 3 weeks. And she chose to spend 4 of those hours with me. I mean, it was all I could do to hold myself together until she left. And then I wailed when I realized the gift that she had given me. That all she had was this very small period of time in which to have whatever experiences she had left. And she chose actively to let 4 hours of that time be with me. So the next time that someone tells you that they love you, next time someone does something kind for you, has gone to the effort to think about how to celebrate your birthday, how to be kind to you, celebrate an anniversary, whatever it happens to be, understand that they only have this much time in this life and they don't know how much. Because unlike that woman, they don't know their expiration date. And yet they made the choice to move themselves a little bit further from their own suffering so that they could bring this to you. And be grateful. Equally, understand when they don't, that they simply couldn't. Just like you always can't. It's huge. It's huge. And the one other thing that I'll say, because I always have to say this when we have this kind of a conversation, is exploring your own inner peace and coming into this place of greater acceptance of yourself and of other people doesn't mean that if someone has harmed you physically, mentally, emotionally, in some significant way, that you have to run up to them, throw your arms around them and be like, I love you, man. You're my BFF. No, because that could be a violence to yourself, making yourself accessible to further violence. So you need to moderate your relationships in such a way where you are the Divine Mother protecting your own self, nurturing and loving your own self, and recognizing that sometimes the kindest thing to do is to keep a distance and wish no harm from there. Yeah. Any other reflections or questions?
I personally find it almost impossible to wish some individual peace and no harm.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's very, very hard. And that's why you have to practice. That's why we practice. We practice and we practice and we practice. We practice some more. And my grandson, he's so sweet and wonderful. He just was in a play. We went to go see him last night. And we had a conversation last year. I said to him, have you been hanging out with your friends a lot this school year? And he said, no, not right now, because they're all in the play and stuff. And I said, oh, well, why aren't you in the play? And he goes, oh, meme, you know me. Mimi. You know me. I don't like the spotlight. I don't want that. And I said, well, what about the crew that builds the stage sets? You could still be involved there. And you'd be learning about that craft and you'd be around your friends. And he was like, oh, I haven't even thought of that. So we talked about it and he was like, well, maybe I'll try out for stage crew next year. So then I come to find out he went in to try out for stage crew, but he missed that audition and ended up trying out for the play instead. And he got 2 very important parts in the play. He played both Cedric and Mr. Voldy, he who shall not be named. He was so good. I think he's got the acting bug now. Yes. But at any rate, so Cedric is a puff, right? So you all know Harry Potter? All right, so there's 4 schools in Harry Potter. There's the brave kids. There's the smart kids. There's the troublemakers who are from wealthy to-do families. And then there's the puffs. And the puffs are really kind of these underrated kids who everybody makes fun of. They're like kind of nerdy and nobody pays attention to them and whatever. And Cedric is probably the most prominent puff. And so Cedric is talking to one of the other puffs, and he goes off on this dialogue, and he says, look, we're puffs. We fail. Okay? We fail. And then we fail. And then we fail some more. And then we fail again, because the kid is trying to do like his spell and it's not working. And he goes, and then we fail again. And you know what's great about being a puff? We fail. And we fail some more. And because we fail, we get to practice more. We get to practice until we don't fail. You get to practice until you don't fail. You get to practice until it's no longer difficult. We all get to practice and practice and practice. And eventually one day, unexpectedly, we'll say, wow, I'm really not angry with that person anymore. And I really don't wish them harm. Okay, next. Not this week, maybe.
Do you get to a place where you're just kind of ambivalent? Like, I've forgiven you, I've even moved on, and I don't even think about this, and I have to remember really hard what happened. Like, is that like, I feel like that's where I'm at with dealing with that type of scenario.
Yeah. I wouldn't call it ambivalent, though. What's the definition of ambivalent? What is it?
Not caring either way.
Not caring, like apathetic.
Yeah.
Apathetic. So not ambivalent. We do go through ambivalence. Absolutely. Where we're just kind of like, but what you're talking about is something more akin to empathy. Although it's different also. I'm not really sure what the word would be. It's an indifference, but it's healthy. It's a healthy indifference. Ambivalence can be healthy, depending upon what the goal is. But this kind of indifference is recognition of the difficulty of it all. When we simply come into acceptance, it's another great word, acceptance. It's like we look back on our life, and sometimes people will say, well, aren't you still angry about that? And I'm like, no, I don't really have a perception of it at this point in my life. It happened so long ago, and I've gone through the anger, I've gone through the hurt, I've gone through the disappointment, I've gone through the process that I have to go through, all of the stages of the grief associated with it, and now it doesn't have a meaning for me. Not because I don't care, but because it's no longer relevant. Yeah, absolutely. There's got to be a great way to say that, right? I know. But yeah, totally. But just understand that there is a difference between just kind of like, my daughter would say, talk to the hand, Mom. That's one thing. Versus this true reconciliation of feelings within one's own self. Yeah. Yeah, it's a great reflection. Thank you for that. Let's sit tall. Close the eyes. Draw the hands together in front of the heart. And we'll lift our voices in one Om. May we all begin with the vow of nonviolence. And in the vow of nonviolence, may we begin by inquiring within our own self of our own behaviors, thoughts, and intentions. And little by little, as we cultivate courage and bravery, may we begin to change those actions, thoughts, and intentions that are conducive to violence. May we bring them closer to peace. And each time we close our eyes, may we feel that courage and that bravery moving us toward the edge, allowing us to dip our toes into the waters of peace. inner peace, and eventually allowing us to submerge ourselves in it. May we come to know our true self as peace, peace, peace. Om Shri Matre Namaha. Thank you all so much for being here today. So wonderful to gather with each and every one of you. So they're still serving brunch. Enjoy your French toast. I'm sure it's going to be delectable. And just a couple of real quick things, I think. We have some changes in the November schedule. So please be sure to look. Not for Sunday mornings. Sunday mornings are stay the same. But we will be adding a wall yoga class Sunday afternoon.
Yes! Are you still doing it? That was Tuesday,
Yes.
right?
Yes, and so what's happening now, wall yoga 5 times. Tuesdays and Thursdays, 6:30 a.m. and 6 p.m. And then Sundays, I don't know what time though. And that'll be for November. And I don't know that we'll continue it in...
That's turning into Thursday wall yoga.
Thursday Hatha at 5 is turning into wall yoga at 6.
What was Tuesday at 4?
6.
Oh.
Nothing at 4. No. And then the mantra class on Thursdays will start at 7:30. So that's been moved back a little bit. And this coming Thursday, we start with the Devi Suktam. And so if you're intrigued and interested to learn a very beautiful prayer to the mother in Sanskrit, then this would be the one to join. It is not easy, but nothing is. It's got to start somewhere. And so that'll start this Thursday for 4 consecutive weeks. And it might end up being part 1 because it is a little bit of a longer scripture. And we're just going to kind of see who's in the class and how we're moving along. And so it might end up being 2 parts. If it's 2 parts, then you'll automatically be enrolled in the second part if you've come into the first one. I just am not making that decision yet because I just have to see who's in the class.
I'll be in the class. There'll be a part 2.
And that's either in line or on person. So you have the ability to be here or to be online for that. Wall yoga in person only. I think that's all for now. All right, thank you everyone. Have a great day. Good to see you all.